I grew up at the perfect time to become obsessed with Peter Jackson's film adaptations of The Lord of the Rings, and subsequently J.R.R. Tolkien's legendarium as a whole. I would scour the library, the internet, ask my family and friends for any sort of information of learning about Tolkien's creation and himself in general while I was waiting for the other films to come out. That is when I was told about the Rankin Bass adaptations of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. As I got older, and was more exposed to other forms of animation like anime after the rest of Jackson's trilogy had come out, and, the other trilogy came out, but we won't talk about that one. I noticed something similar about The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King adaptations by Rankin and Bass, and the masterful animations of Hayao Miyazaki's Studio Ghibli films. Let's follow the trail of the invisible red string and see how they're all connected, shall we? While many of us know about and are able to identify a Rankin Bass production from their stop-motion animation Christmas classics that were all puppeteered in Japan, check out my video on them after this video. What a lot of people don't know, however, is that Rankin Bass also collaborated with Japanese animation studios to animate their productions. Productions like King Kong, Cricket on the Hearth, and Frosty the Snowman. One such company was Topcraft. Topcraft had a long-term relationship with Rankin Bass, working from pre-production storyboarding to completing all of the animation for major projects like Frosty's Winter Wonderland, 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, and even the later cult classic, The Last Unicorn. In 1972, Topcraft was tasked with animating the children's fantasy classic, The Hobbit, for a made-for-TV film. $3 million, and 5 years later, the film was aired in 1977. After the success of The Hobbit, Topcraft was again assigned by Rankin Bass to adapt their style to the final chapter of Tolkien's fantasy epic, The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. While watching these films, as I said before, in the early 2000s, I noticed that the background players, the faces of the men, whether it be Gondorian knights or the Men of Dale, there was a familiarity to them. Not from watching the VHS and DVDs hundreds of times, but from something I thought I had seen before. I just wasn't sure what it was. And after watching them to commemorate the life of their Bilbo Frodo star, Orson Bean, who recently passed away, it hit me. I've seen these faces, textures, and movements in Studio Ghibli films before. And to thank for that is the animation coordinator, Toru Hara. After Topcraft completed these adaptations for Rankin Bass, they eventually went on to produce Hayao Miyazaki's directorial debut, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, in 1984, with Hara being an animation producer. And a year later, after the success of the film, Topcraft, as we know it, dissolved and turned into Studio Ghibli. And I don't think I have to go into the massive influence that name has. However, while Miyazaki often gets most of the credit, Hara and other animation colleagues played just as an important role in establishing the Studio Ghibli name as we know it today. By using his experiences on the animation team for The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, Hara brought about the refinement of the style used in the Tolkien adaptations to Studio Ghibli's most iconic films, from Castle in the Sky, My Neighbor Totoro, Grave of the Fireflies, and Kiki's Delivery Service. Here are a few examples of what I'm talking about. Whenever there is need for dynamic close-ups, the detailing and animations become so much more heightened and aggressive. The illumination slow motion of the magical and worthy objects in Studio Ghibli films, like this section from Castle in the Sky, can be found in The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, as Sam and Frodo are tempted by the One Ring's power. The castle and fortress architecture in The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King can easily be recognized as the same in later Studio Ghibli films. From Tolkien's legendarium to Studio Ghibli, we have taken in on a most unexpected journey. I hope you found this exploration of following the invisible red thread to be interesting. If you did, please don't forget to subscribe and to like the video. Thank you.